this unit today, we will go into the analysis of the various stages of human development. Please understand the background of this has been deliberations among the researching anthropologists that human societies all over the world have gone through the several stages which are today represented by different tribals throughout the world who are at different stages of their economic and cultural life. We shall go into the historical development. Just imagine, amazing it is, if ever since amoeba, the first organic life, came onto the surface of the earth, if right up to the modern man, the entire history of life on earth could be put into a compact 1 year period, modern man does not appear till about the 7 minutes before 31st December midnight. That means, in the long period of life on this earth, modern man has come into existence for a fraction. Just imagine 7 minutes within a whole 1 year period. And out of these 7 minutes, if you think of the civilization, that is, to which we belong, the non-tribals belong, it hardly comes to about one last minute before the midnight of 31st December. That means, the remaining 6 minutes before midnight has been the period that human beings have survived at different stages of development before they became what they have become. Just about 15,000 years ago, modern man came into existence the way we see most of them around the world, and just about 10 to 12,000 years ago, man started domesticating animals, and only in the last 6,000 years human beings have started living in the cities that are so common today as we see around the world, including our own country. Historical development. Just imagine, amazing it is, if ever since amoeba, the first organic life, came onto the surface of the earth, if right up to the modern man, the entire history of life on earth could be put into a compact 1 year period, modern man does not appear till about the 7 minutes before 31st December midnight. That means, in the long period of life on this earth, modern man has come into existence for a fraction. Just imagine 7 minutes within a whole 1 year period. And out of these 7 minutes, if you think of the civilization, that is, to which we belong, the non-tribals belong, it hardly comes to about one last minute before the midnight of 31st December. That means, the remaining 6 minutes before midnight has been the period that human beings have survived at different stages of development before they became what they have become. Just about 15,000 years ago, modern man came into existence the way we see most of them around the world, and just about 10 to 12,000 years ago, man started domesticating animals, and only in the last 6,000 years human beings have started living in the cities that are so common today as we see around the world, including our own country. In this particular unit, we are going to go through analyzing the ways of life of the people, their economy, their culture at different stages. To remind you again, the classification is based on deliberations among anthropologists, based on research, identifying the different stages that the human development has taken place all through thousands of years, today represented by different tribals around the world who are passing through these stages. The most primordial level in humanoid development has been food gathering and hunting. We will come back to it after we go through the entire classification. In the typology of classification based on the way people have lived and also their economy, Next to food gathering and hunting are the direct forest hunting type. The people who live in forests, and they are not only hunters, they of course supplement their hunting by certain other collection of edible material available in the forest, like honey for instance, which is available in its purest form in the forests. Hill cultivation type. As we know, many tribals live on the slopes of hillocks and mountains, and there are the taboos available on the surface of the hilly tracts where some cultivation is possible. Actually, these people who live in these parts do not have to toil too much for cultivation at all. Pretty fertile steppes available with streams flowing around on the hillocks from where they get water. Some ponds of fresh water also created at certain levels on the hilly tracts, which will be used for agriculture. Next is little more settled type, that is cultivation as the main occupation. Please understand, we will come back to it again. The basic difference between the primordial level, that is food gathering and hunting, and rudimentary and settled agriculture is that only with agriculture human beings become producers. During the food gathering stage and hunting stage, they depended on what was available. That means they were not producing for their food. Only agricultural way of life brought human beings into production in the form of food that they would need to consume. And besides agricultural way of life, there are artisans. In one sense, every tribal group is specialized in some kind of handicrafts or the other. In fact, artisan as a way of life is not uncommon for all tribes, but yet there are certain tribes who specialize in producing certain handcrafts and other artificially manufactured crafts and arts. And then there are, in more recent times, tribal people where industrial development has taken place. That is very interesting. Tribal people live in places which are very rich in minerals and other form of fossil energy producing items. And in the name of development, large scale industrial undertakings come in their neighborhood. What an irony in the life of tribal people. There is so much in the name of modern development that is taking place exactly next door to where they have been living for years and years, but they neither have participation in what is going on, nor they get the fruits of the so called development projects. And then there are folk artists who specialize in folk songs, folk dance, folk music, narration of folk tales. In fact, that becomes their major way of running their life. In fact, they go into the neighborhoods on several occasions of the tribal festivals. They are also invited by the neighboring tribal groups and they go and perform there. And then there is a cultural classification. Besides the economy, as I indicated earlier on, it brings people living in a particular area to lead a certain kind of life. Take for instance food collection. There is not much of technology, probably only hoe, which they use for digging the roots and they collect the fruits. So, there is not much technology available. But what happens is, given the size of the tribe depending on food gathering, they live in a particular place where only certain varieties are available. Maybe they will venture a little bit into the surrounding areas, but yet food may get exhausted. Then what happens? People are busy collecting food the whole day. Perhaps they will be busy collecting food for the whole day, and back home the women are busy preparing the food for consumption, and there is no concept of tomorrow, because tomorrow again they will go for food collection, collecting fruits and edible roots available in the neighborhood. So, they live in a particular area depending on the size of the community, maybe 100 or couple of hundreds. Maybe they will exhaust whatever food is available in the form of fruits and roots. Maybe they will exhaust it, in a matter of 1 or 2 generations. Because they are not producing anything, they will have to think of going to another place. So, therefore, there is not much of settlement at all in the way of life of the people when they are in the food gathering stage. And then comes the unsettled primary agriculture. They become little bit of producers. In fact, sometimes we can think of the modern concept of horticulture, not large scale, some little fruits, some plants being grown in order to meet their needs of consumption of fruits or roots. But it will still make them live in a certain area depending on whatever they are producing. Again, because nothing is done by human beings in order to increase the fertility of the soil, perhaps the productivity of the plants on which they are depending lasts only for a short while, maybe again 2 or 3 generations. Then again they will have to shift to another neighboring area. And then comes little more settled. Now they know what is to be done in order to make the plants produce better fruits and better roots. So they are settled in a particular place for more than a mere couple of generations. That brings a sea change in the way of life of the people. For the first time in human development, people come to identify each other, identify a concept of a family. In fact, they have been so busy through the earlier stages just fending for food. They have no time even to interact with each other in a serious manner of regular relationship. So much so, during the primordial stages of hunting and gathering, people do not even perhaps recognize who is the father of the children that are getting born. Of course, by nature they will identify the mothers all right. Now, when we think of these stages, analysts have tried to identify semi important ones where this is not contributing directly to the way of life and the economy of the community. Herders, cattle herders or goat or sheep herders are supplemented by handicrafts and industry. In fact, as I referred to earlier, when industrial development took place, people became part of them, but then they were totally unskilled laborers participating in the industry. Now, participating in the industrial world around exposed the tribal people for the first time to a whole variety of items that were new to them. They were like very interesting, mysterious objects for them. They got interested in it. But the most important thing we must note is that exposure to the industrial life around and the non-tribal people around exposed them for the first time in their lives to the concept of money. Till then, people in the tribal areas have always lived in a non-monetary economy. Obvious outcome of this attraction was some tribes got into criminal ways of life, stealing bit here and there, whatever they got interested in, whatever they found interesting or tasty for consumption, or even a larger scale robbery in the neighborhood in the industrial belt. Now we have found in more recent times that all tribes out of necessity, maybe not always the choice of the tribal people, but also what is imposed on them. The tribes have come under transition. The most notable tribes under transition are the forest hunting type, because even in pre-independent times and after India became independent, forest laws were promulgated, and people who were depending on the forest, the tribal people, they were evicted from the forest, because now the forest did not belong to the tribal people, the forest belonged to the government. So they were moved out. So there was a sea change in the life of the people who had not known any world outside of the forest. Then hill cultivation of the simple type, but as they modernize, they also come to supplement the harvesting methods and the cultivation methods. But again, those who are dependent on hill cultivation do not have to spend much time for watering the plants, because there are naturally flowing streams and rivulets on the surface of the downward mountains. plain cultivation type. Some of them now resorted to cultivation as the major way of life. We shall come further into the details of this in the later part of this unit. And then simple artisan type, producing handicrafts. As I mentioned earlier, producing by hand several through bamboo items and clay and even some smelting of simple metals like tin, iron, etc. is nothing new to tribal people. They produce beautiful handicrafts through their own skills in developing their own original ideas, producing in the form of models. Pastoral and cattle breeder tribe, and there are tribes which depend on domestication of animals, whether it is cattle or sheep or goat, and they also come to understand a little bit about increasing the prosperity of these particular animals that they are domesticating. In fact, that was the birth of a variety of festivals in order to promote what are known as fertility festivals developed by tribal people. In fact, most tribal functions, tribal festivals surround the concept of fertility, both the fertility of human beings as well as cattle. In fact, originally it began with the animals that they are bringing up, and ultimately turned out to be the contribution to increasing the fertility of the human race also. We will come to know a little bit more about it in the further part of these lectures. And then folk artist type. Folk artist type are those who specialize in narrating folk tales, singing folk songs, presenting folk dances and playing folk music. We will now come back to the most important part of this particular subunit, which I mentioned earlier, that is the primordial level of humanoid development, that is food gathering and hunting. We will go further in the unit to learn about the other stages that the classification has been mentioned now. The first, the food gathering. In fact, food gathering stage, as I said, is primordial, the first stage through which human society passed in order for survival. The most important thing with the food gathering stage is that human beings are not producers of food, they only consume what is available. But then whatever is available in the form of fruits and edible roots may not be sufficient. So, all tribals developed small scale hunting, small scale trapping of birds and small scale fishing also, small game hunting with simple bow and arrow that are available, small game around in the forest. Trapping of birds, very interesting. This author was a witness to trapping of birds, a very simple technique. A few sticks are laid out in a particular formation and resinous gum is applied to all these sticks, and some colorful seeds are kept in the middle of this formation. Attracted by the look of the colorful seeds, little birds would fly to peck over the seeds, but because they sit on the sticks which are smeared with resinous gums, their web feet get stuck and they are not able to fly quickly. They get stuck and they trap these birds for consumption. Fish. You want to know how fishing began or how fishing can be done? Simple. You catch fish. Catch fish by the dictionary meaning. I was a personal witness to a young fellow standing like a statue in the middle of water with his open palm under the surface of the water. Just standing there like a statue where a whole show of fish would be passing. As the shoal came near him, he would close his palm, thereby trapping a couple of fish in his hands. Catching fish, no technique, no technology, no gadgetry. Catch fish simply by like the dictionary meaning. Of course, an improvised method is having a little piece of wooden stick with a broad butt end. Again, standing like a statue with the stick underneath the surface of the water, and when a shoal of fish passes, he would thump it on the shoal of fish. Probably one or two fish get caught under the stub end of the stick and become unconscious, if that term can be used for the fish. They would float and he would pick up these fish. Well, whether he would pocket it and take it home for cooking, or whether he would swallow it straight away depended on how hungry he was. Next come the hunters. Very simple hunting with very simple bow and arrow. But then little more complicated. They developed different kinds of arrows and different kinds of arrow points. Some of them even smeared with some kind of poisonous resin, so that as soon as it touches an animal, because of the poison it may die, not because of the shooting of the arrow as such. Although it is not part of Indian tribal life, I must refer you to boomerang, which is known very well among Australian aborigines. Boomerang is a kind of a L-shaped wooden piece. The beauty of this boomerang is when they throw it, it cuts the targeted animal's neck, and the implement comes back to the man who has thrown it, the hunter. A beautiful kind of a technology developed by Australian aborigines. Now, the term boomerang has come part of the English language for everyday life. When you try to harm somebody and it comes back to hit you, you say your effort got boomeranged on you. In the next part of this unit, we will follow through the other types of the way of life of the tribal people that were enumerated earlier in this lecture.